Ready now?
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. If you would like to call the roll.
Member Hart,
Here.
Member Cornell,
Sorry, couldn't quite hear you.
Here.
Member Snyder, here. Member Pinkerton,
Here till 4 o'clock.
Member Lobardo.
Here.
Member Certain.
Here. I think Cheryl and Nancy were going to be on via Zoom. I'm not sure if they're on.
I'm online. I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm on. This is
Okay.
Cheryl.
And
I'm on as well, Karen Cole Smith, I'm on.
And
Thank
this
you.
is Judge Miller Jones. I'm also online, but for some reason it's coming up as Karen Brake, my assistant. So I'm going to change that in just a moment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, welcome everybody. Just our usual notice to the public, either here or online, any member of the public wishing to be heard either under the agenda section, general public comment, or on a specific agenda item, shall complete an appearance card and present the card to the clerk of the trust prior to the start of the board or committee meeting. In the event following the start of the board or committee meeting, additional items are added to the agenda. Then, with the consent of the chair of the meeting, any member of the public may submit an appearance card to speak on such additional items prior to board or committee discussion of such items. Members of the public recognized by the chair will have 3 minutes to speak on a single subject matter submitted on an appearance card presented prior to the start of the meeting. In the event an individual submits multiple requests to be heard on more than one agenda item, the chair shall determine the amount of time allotted to the speaker. However, such time shall not exceed 10 minutes without approval of the board or committee. The clerk of the trust will function as official timekeeper. Members of the public may not share or transfer all or part of their allotted time to any other person or to any other agenda item, except as permitted by this policy. To the extent a speaker has previously addressed a board or committee on the same subject, and at which a majority of the board are present, then the board chair may limit repeated comments at the board meeting by the same speaker. The board may provide members of the public the option to participate in board or committee meetings electronically. If such an option is provided, the procedures herein apply. If the board or committee will provide members of the public with an electronic means to complete an appearance card and present the card to the clerk of the trust prior to the start of the board or committee meeting. Thank you. All right. Yes.
So I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So we have 3 members participating via Zoom.
Yes.
How do our rules work with regards to the ability to participate, vote, not vote?
My understanding from Mr. Swain is that they are allowed to participate in the discussion, provide an opinion as to the matter at hand, but they cannot vote while they're on the Zoom, which is why it's important that we do have a forum here physically present. All right, the reason we're here, late in the evening on Monday, the 21st, I received a complaint from a staff person. Upon review of that complaint, I also then looked at our policy regarding those complaints. And the first thing Tuesday morning, I referred that complaint to Ms. Howard at James Moore, to whom we had outsourced our HR function, and to Mr. Swain to make sure that everything we did was procedurally in line with our policies and other legal requirements. And so now we
Lost connection, haven't we?
Lost connection.
Correct, I've lost connection as well.
Well, I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Yeah,
No, it must be on the,
I believe it's on their end.
Will someone send them a notification?
I'll text Chairman Lombardo right now.
Thank you. It's also difficult to hear her. It's difficult to hear her. I don't know if you all are having the same problem.
yeah, very much so.
Thank you.
It's coming in and out.
Correct.
All right, hopefully people can hear us now. So just to repeat, we're going to hear first from Ms. Howard with her findings. We're going to hear then from Mr. Swain as to any procedural issues that we need to be aware of. And then I'd like to give Mr. Murphy an opportunity to speak and address us before we move to the item around status and action. So with that, Ms. Howard, can you hear us now?
I can't hear you.
All right. Then hopefully we will be, it looks like we will be able to hear you if you want to proceed.
Okay, thank you. As you stated, Dr. Lombarda, you reached out to me on the 22nd, letting me know that there had been an employee complaint on the executive director. I reviewed the complaint and then I reached back out to you, both you and Mr. Swain, the attorney. We all determined at that point a due diligence investigation was necessary to look further into the complaint. So at that point, I reached out to the complainant because there was a retreat the following day, and typical HR fashion is to whoever the complaint is on to remove them from the situation on administrative leave so that no threats, there's no threat to the complainant. Unfortunately, the retreat was pre-planned and very important. So I reached out to the complainant to ask if it was okay if she could still participate and he could still participate in the retreat. At that point, she did say she was comfortable, and we then decided that the following day we would put the executive director on administrative leave to proceed with the investigation. I then was returned on the 23rd. I reached out to Nicole Odom. If you review in the complaint, she was mentioned as a potential witness to similar behavior. During that witness testimony, she really didn't have the same type of meeting as the complainant. She did mention a couple behaviors that were consistent with the complainant's initial complaint of she had gotten adjusted to what she identified as yelling when she initially met Colin, but proceeded as a year she worked with him. She just said he had an abrasive approach and he was impassioned when about events, not necessarily individuals. However, individuals could take that as a personal, but she had learned that it wasn't about her in person, more so about the events that he would get frustrated or get impassioned about. So then when I met with Ms. Goldwire, she really supported her initial complaint, which everybody has a copy of. It's an attachment included in the packet. She stated that initially on Tuesday, they had a meeting about the temperature, and he was still pretty upset from the February 14th board meeting, but that meeting was pretty calm. And then the next meeting on the 18th, he identified it that he wanted to have a quote unquote risky meeting with her and discuss some issues. From that point, he really went into depth how he felt that they were not a partner in the actual organization, that it was her team versus his team. And she said that her team didn't like him. As you can see in the actual notes, she addressed that she needed to fix their relationship and that it was causing issues within the department. And he was very upset about his scores that he received. And he seemed to assume that the negative scores came from her team. She even asked how he knew that the negative scores came from her team, and he said he didn't, but she had a big piece of the team, and she felt that she should encourage her team to give him higher scores, and that in his situation, if he was in the same situation, he would accept nothing less than 4.5s from his team for their executive director, and he would have taken a bullet for his former leader. She also mentioned that after the Gallup scores were released, there was a meeting subsequently to discuss, the work environment. In that meeting, Colin did not attend. She did take some notes, and it was alleged that Colin asked her to destroy those notes because there were unfavorable comments from the staff about Colin in that meeting. He reiterated that he didn't feel supported, and he had been taking a beating since about August, and he had been getting blasted by the board. He also associated that quote unquote blasting with a measurable of performance that they do weekly. It's like their workload measures. And apparently you're either a green, a yellow, or a red. And when you're green, it means like your workload is, you're comfortable with your workload. Things are functioning. The week went well. Yellow means you might, you've got a lot going on, and red is completely overwhelmed. He stated that her continually put yellow meant her team would continually put yellow, and the board saw that as unfavorable, as if they were overwhelmed. And once again reiterated she needed to fix the relationship between them. He knew he had upset her. He even identified that, I can tell you're mad, because she even said, I'm angry by, how you're approaching this with me and how this meeting is going. And he basically, I know you're mad, but kind of dismissively said, you'll be mad for a couple of days and I might take a day off. So it was, in her words, a very intimidating meeting. She felt very threatened that she's not fulfilling his obligations, that her team aren't fulfilling his obligations. She just felt very caught off guard. She mentioned his abrasiveness and that there's a lot of yelling coming from him, and it comes off as intimidating and threatening. And the staff really don't know how to handle it. And so oftentimes they just don't say anything. I know that as well, I met with you, Dr. Lombarda, and you also submitted a statement that it's kind of same temperature, that he was very frustrated since the board meeting, especially with the denial of additional compensation. And that he just has reiterated that he's not used to being in a place where he's not liked. And that was really weighing on him and causing his reaction. Finally, I met with Mr. Murphy, and I asked him a lot of the questions that, pertain to Ms. Goldwire's complaint. And he had stated that the meeting, he identified it as a risky meeting with Ms. Odom because they had a prior, and Ms. Odom also supported this, that they had a prior meeting where Ms. Odom felt overwhelmed, and it was, she was what she called a meltdown, but she was just overwhelmed and upset and felt like she wasn't meeting his expectations. And so when he said it was a risky meeting, it was really just follow up, but he didn't know if it was going to trigger her to get upset again. But they had it didn't obviously end that way. But when he identified that with Christy, he said the tone of the meeting wasn't a typical tone of their meeting. So that's why he identified it as risky. Let's see here. He wanted to discuss what he called the employee climate, and again, how he had felt like he had taken a beating throughout since the board evaluation, specifically by Chairman Cornell. Board member Cornell. He also stated that he received information from an outside consultant and he was disheartened by that information, that this consultant said that Christy had unfortunately confided in him and in the consultant, and said, voiced her concerns to the outside consultant about Colin's leadership and Mr. Murphy's leadership. And that really upset him to find that out. Let's see here. So when I asked formally about, did he intend to ask her if she should have changed her score, and if she should have pushed her employees to score him differently, and the comment about taking a bullet, he said he didn't expect her to do that, but that he was just using himself as an example in that scenario. He says it's odd that he feels that it is very split between the rest of the team and Christy's team specifically, that they won't speak unless she speaks, and she'll even make a comment of, well, I guess I have to speak first. That there's no cohesion, and it's very apart. He did address the fact that he knows he does raise his voice. He says he doesn't feel that it's abrasive, but may categorize himself as direct. He identified that he doesn't brainstorm well, and that comes from a frustration, and so that can come off intense. I asked specifically about the notes from the Gallup. He said he did not ask her to throw away any notes. However, if he would have said anything, it would have been that she should not take notes. I asked about the weekly report. He again went back to he felt he had been taking a beating. That was a common theme throughout, and that he lacked support, and he got blasted for the staff consistently being on yellow. Mr. Murphy stated that it sets for the tone for the programs teams again. So if she's on yellow, they'll be on yellow. And he feels that, again, that is enhancing the split between the teams. I asked him when these concerns arise, since he marked her, when did these concerns rise? Because I reviewed her evaluation, and her evaluation was very high. And he stated it really didn't have anything to do with her actual performance. She could still perform very well. It's just the tone was still there, and the tone had recently gotten worse. He did feel that their relationship was decent and likened it to the upper half of the Maslow triangle. So he used that as a visual. I asked him, because in Christy's interview, she mentioned that sometimes he goes for vent sessions with her for a drive, or they might go get something. And she's always felt, she did reassure me, she always felt comfortable in those scenarios. And he said that they had recently gone coffee, but they never, he said, I realized I was talking so much and we never got coffee and just drove around. When speaking with Dr. Lombardo, he did confirm that he vented about his frustrations with the board and how it felt like a slap in the face of the year, because he felt like the CTAC had really achieved a lot last year. And then he verified that he had mentioned he felt lonely in the position. So to reiterate my observations that are within the report, obviously the report is further in detail. It has all the attachments that I refer to, whether it be statements, emails, evaluations. But I will say, I don't think Mr. Murphy is malicious in his intent in handling these situations or how he handles employees. But I do think he lacks self-awareness and understanding that his behavior and his communication style is completely inappropriate and unprofessional for a workplace setting. I think, the more that stresses continue, the more he unfortunately does knee-jerk reactions and doesn't necessarily, when he's unsupported or attacked, doesn't necessarily make reasonable decisions that are best suited for the organization. It's unfortunate. I don't think it's the same exact scenario as a past scenario. However, when I read the reports from the past scenario, there are very much many, quite a few likenesses and patterns that I noticed in his management style and leadership skills. So that's my report and observations. Any questions for me so far?
Any questions? So don't see any. Thank you, Ms. Howard.
Thank you.
Mr. Swain?
We got here from a process standpoint based upon analogy. The current policies we have in place were built upon a situation where the complainant was no longer the employee of the trust. So there was no reason to separate individuals, and there was no provision in the materials to separate the individuals, because when we built those policies, we weren't thinking about the executive director and employee being in conflict while they're both employed. The first thing you do in employment law is you separate the individuals. After you separate the complainant away from the individual they're complaining about, that often is viewed as evidence of retaliation in and of itself. So because of that, following the advice of Katie, a decision was made to put Colin on administrative leave pending the investigation, the initial investigation, and this board's ability to see that investigation and decide next steps. The reason that an emergency meeting was called as opposed to waiting for the next regular agenda, is that we did not feel comfortable having him on administrative leave for a long period of time on the authority of just the three of us. So we felt it was important to get the board together to look at this situation. because the board's an independent district, there are limitations on how you call an emergency meeting. And any action this board takes today will have to be ratified at the next regular meeting. That's a timing issue and what was publicized in the newspaper. So we were dealing with the situation by analogy. It's not clearly in the policies, but it was felt that there was inherent risk in allowing the status quo to exist in the workplace. There are the whistleblower, I say analogy because it is not clear that this is a whistleblower claim. There is certainly no one has alleged any illegal action. No one has alleged any discriminatory action. There, if you want to parse words about ethics and when you deal with individuals, you can, but that is not clear from what the intent of the whistleblower complaints were. So using that as a model, the determination was made to do something basically quick, investigate the facts, and provide the board with what we know. Now the board has the options of going forward with a formal investigation, outside investigation, which is what the whistleblower would contemplate, a formal outside investigation. I can advise you that I did have a county HR look at the process that was followed, which is, of course, is not a normal investigation. But according to the county HR, the process was appropriate as far as conducting the investigation, what is documented and the like. That is far different than what an outside investigation would be, of taking the statements and doing everything from scratch. You are not required to do an investigation to take action. Under the contract, you can. And if you want to conduct an investigation further, it would be appropriate to continue administrative leave until that investigation is complete. Otherwise, the choices before the board, the immediate choices are accept the report and do nothing, just advise people to do a better job in getting along together. Consider termination. We can talk about for cause if there are any specific questions about cause. For convenience, which is a different thing for cause, or to explore the options that Mr. Murphy has put forward in his letter to the board, and any other ideas that anyone else has that may come out this week.
Questions for Mr. Simon?
I have a question. I think I missed a letter with options from Mr. Because did it come out today? I've been out all day.
No, I emailed it,
Okay.
but I brought hard copies of anything that.
Yeah, I'll take one because I don't know what options.
I'm sorry, I've got so many emails, so I
Yeah.
apologize after this past week.
I also have a copy of the employment agreement and a copy of the investigation, hard copies. And I would also point out that according to our bylaws, we do have a quorum present because we have 6. So we have a frank quorum, whether or not this Dr. Simon is still a member, and that any action to terminate requires a majority of the serving members, which at the moment would be 5. So it's not a simple majority of the people present.
All right. Let's finish questions. If you don't mind.
I have a statement.
Yeah, I'd like to include Mr. Murphy first.
I'm just going to read my statement for the record, if that's all right. 2 years ago, I had the honor and privilege of becoming the first executive director of the Children's Trust of Alachua County. At that time, no one could predict the impact that the suffering caused by the pandemic would have on our community Even though we were small, with my leadership and your support, the trust was able to contribute to the response with flexibility to our agencies and by providing remote learning pods in the community. Since that time, I have led the effort to stand up an entire organization that has begun to make a massive positive difference in the lives of children in our community. And as an aside, I have put every ounce of mental and physical effort into the job over the last 2 years. This year alone, the budget, the board has approved grants granting out over $5 million in programming to provide 500 children after school programming, screen 1,000 pregnant mothers, visit over 700 new mothers in their home, provide jobs for 150 teenagers, provide summer camp seats for 2,000 children, bring Help Me Grow services to Alachua County to ensure age-appropriate growth and development, train 15 child care business owners through the Business Leadership Institute for Early Learning, provide professional development to 64 early learning teachers, serve 50 children in the new Freedom School, participate in the Partnership for Reimagining Gainesville, helping to incubate new and innovative ideas. I could go on, however, none of this would have been possible without the excellent staff that's been assembled here. The 9 members of the CTAC are some of the finest people with whom I have worked in my entire career. The foundation has been laid to improve the lives of children and families for years to come. However, over the past few months, it is clear to me that the board and I are out of alignment on several issues. My performance evaluation and subsequent events now focus on criticisms of my management and communication style. All of this is a distraction to the important work the CTAC was created to do. I remain willing to continue in my present role to ensure the continuity of services CTAC offers to our community for our partners. However, I can understand that if you believe that it may be better for me to step aside, I respectfully ask the board to negotiate with my attorney my separation from the Children's Trust of Alachua County. Many children will benefit from the work of the CTAC in the years to come, and I am proud knowing that I have played a part. Thank you.
Number 21.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Colin, I want to thank you for this March 4th letter. It put a different perspective on what I was thinking about after I read through all of the background information that was provided prior to this. And I have no desire to put forth a motion to terminate the executive for cause. I think that there's been a lot of accomplishments, but I do believe that based on what I've learned, that this is a distraction. And so when the board is ready, I would put a motion on the floor to authorize the chair and the attorney to negotiate a mutually acceptable separation agreement that's aligned with the executive director's.
I would agree with that. I'll just leave it with that. I can support Dave's motion.
We don't have the other motion on the floor, just to be clear, we're just discussing it.
Well, I wouldn't even just, I will say that. I thank you, Mr. Murphy, for your letter. I read the report from Ms. Howard, and I was a bit disturbed. So for me, I arrived here today with an open mind, but I promise you, it was with a really heavy heart, because some of the things I read in there were really, really disturbing to me in the investigation. And because I've worked in a hostile environment, I would not want to, I wouldn't want to be part of perpetuating that in the organization. I've worked under those conditions, and I know it's very hard to do that. And I was disappointed by a few of the things I read in there, but I don't think it was malicious. I just think it was just missteps. I could agree with what Ms. Howard said, but nonetheless, even if it's not malicious, the actions really do kind of, the not speaking and interacting with your subordinates in a professional manner causes a lot of undue stress on people, and that's just not something I like to support. Because like I said, I worked in it for a number of years, and I know the burden that people on employees to come into a situation and they want to do a really good job, but you don't ever know what you're gonna get from the leaders. So for me, I came here honestly was trying not to have a heavy heart, but I really did have a heaviness about me after I've worked in that environment. So I was a bit disturbed to read how, folks say, well, yells and swings and stuff, and then it is stressful. We're in the pandemic and we got a lot of things and it has been stressful. I don't deny that. I just think it was unsettling. Others?
Not sure. I guess, I don't think that interaction was handled appropriately. And I think there's another approach to the way to handle the question is, and Colin's done a lot. He's accomplished a lot. And the question is, we don't have a way of knowing, are those relationships broken? Is there no longer trust? Can it be repaired? I know that the action of the board last time was to ask Colin to take a leadership training course, of which you agree with. Do we want to complete that? Do we want to set up some sort of facilitation between with a CPAC body and just let them see if it can work? I guess it boils down to whether or not, what the board feels. Can we go any further? Is there something that we can do to repair what's been going? And if we don't, obviously, then just leave that there. But, is there a willingness to see if we can take that approach before we terminate the contract with the executive director?
Others? Member Hart.
I have absolutely no interest in terminating the contract, and I'm not really eager for Colin to separate. I think it would be a self-inflicted for all of us, because we're so new, where the plane isn't quite taken off yet, and I totally understand working in a hostile environment. Just ask me afterwards about what it's like to work at College of Medicine in the Science Center. I've never been surrounded by so many yelling people, throwing things. And I can assure you, that if I went to HR and said, so-and-so yelled at me and threw things, I would be the one dismissed, not the yeller or the thrower. So that's not a healthy environment, and perhaps there are problems in this environment, but I would suggest, what I suggested at our last meeting, it would be so nice for Colin to have a coach. And it's not the same as taking an HR leadership course, it's a coach. Somebody to say, well, wouldn't it be better to try it this way or try it that way? And maybe Christy would like a coach. If she would like a coach, I think we should get her a coach. But I just see this whole process as a self-inflicted wound, and I oppose all of it, all of the separation. I hope Colin would continue to stay with us.
Others?
I don't really have anything else to add. I'm like everyone else trying to think about this Colin indicates in his letter, all of the positive things that have occurred. But also, I guess I'm unsure if his continuation with or without supports put in place will be better for him, for the organization, for our full. I would welcome more discussion about that because I feel very uncertain about it. I appreciate what you're saying, Nancy. I agree. Sometimes change isn't necessarily the solution. I feel very strongly people should be supported in leadership roles. So I don't know at this point.
So we want to give an opportunity to the three board members that are online before we come back to member certain who wanted to add some comments, and then I will make some before we move to public. But
to after membership.
all right, so member Cornell after member certain. So Judge or Dr. Goldsmith or Ms. Townley, would you like to make comments?
For me, it's very difficult to hear. I'm only hearing in bits and pieces. I'm not sure what the others are hearing. I'm only hearing in bits and pieces in terms of what's being said. But as I sit here, one of the things that has come to mind, and I shared it when I had a conversation with Mr. Murphy a couple of weeks ago, and I gave him, I made some suggestions as to how we could improve our relationships with the community, because I thought that that was such an important priority. And so I'm thinking, had we had some of those components in place, maybe there would not have been so much frustration, and maybe the frustration would not have led to all of the things that we've been hearing. I certainly don't support any of the things that I have been reading in terms of how people were spoken to or how people are treated in the workplace. I too, as an African-American woman, can relate to how it feels when you are being treated or spoken to in a certain way. But there were two things that I mentioned to Mr. Murphy that I think still should be given some serious consideration in the future that would help either him or whoever comes aboard. And I'd like to share with you again what those suggestions are if I have time. Do I have a few minutes to share that?
Certainly.
Okay. And he did put those suggestions on page 80 in the previous meeting that we had. Okay. One of the suggestions says the hiring of a part-time or full-time person that would work under our community engagement director. We have those 3 or 4 mission statements, but I suggested that it's important that we should have persons that represent all 4 of the main goals of the Children's Trust. I felt very strongly that it should not be just that one person. If we say that these are the 4 major areas, there should be 4 major people out in the community, visible front and center, that everybody in the community knew something about. So I do support the position of the community engagement director, but I feel strongly that under that major umbrella, there should be persons representing those 4 main goals. And I think that would help reduce maybe some of the tension that we have in the community. The second suggestion I mentioned to Mr. Murphy was to hire a person that would serve as a case manager of sorts to help those whose grants were not approved. Given our low approval rate of the grants that are being submitted, this would allow us to give more in-depth and meaningful feedback to those who submitted grants. Here again, a lot of the dissension and a lot of the issues centered around those persons who did not get their grants approved. And I think at one of the meetings, someone mentioned that while we had reviewed a large number of grants, there were very few that were actually approved. So if we had a person that could serve as a case manager of sorts, I think that that would help us in terms of moving forward. And then a third suggestion I mentioned was that we might want to have an in-house grant writer full-time who can assist those in the community who have great ideas but little skill in putting grants together. And then my final comment said, I believe that each of these efforts would send a strong message to the community that we hear them and that we're here to support them, as well as meeting the needs of the kids. And so my major point here is that if some of these things could be in place or had been in place, we could have maybe not eliminated, but certainly reduced some of the tension and some of the negative issues we experienced in the community this past year. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cole-Smith. Others, Ms. Townley or Judge?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I, like Dr. Hart, have worked for some very strong-willed, strong, determined individuals in the years that I've worked for my department. And I think where they could still be successful is they found the balance between their personal determination and the motivation for their teams, being able to motivate their team successfully. I think it becomes more difficult to be effective when the personality begins to negatively impact the effectiveness of the team and their ability to function cohesively under that leader. From what I've read, it appears that we're kind of in the position of having to ask ourselves the question of, would Colin be able to comfortably stay in his role and lead this team, and would the team be comfortable under his leadership? I know we've heard from a couple of the members of the team. I don't know how the rest is feeling right now. So that was one of my questions on whether or not, there are others that are in the team that are having similar issues. I've worked for people that yelled, and I think I said it in the last meeting that, I spoke with Colin before that, and some of Colin's personality reminds me of a particular leader. I became very fond of him. It took me a long time because I had to learn that style and be comfortable with it. But, I've said to Colin before that, sometimes the quieter voice really gets the job done. And, this becomes more of a personality driven issue than it becomes a capability issue, because I see Colin as a brilliant individual. I look at what he's been able to accomplish in the year plus that he has been serving as a trust director. But I also know Christy very well from her prior roles. And, if she is in a position where she doesn't feel she can move forward, or this isn't salvageable, it definitely is something that we as a board have a responsibility to figure out how we move forward. So that's basically what I have to say.
Thank you. Judge Miller-Jones, do you have some input you'd like to provide? She's not on anymore. Then I'm coming back to Member Certain and then to Member Connor.
Thank you. I'll try to speak this way since Cole-Smith said she didn't. I in listening to the input from my fellow board members, I'll say I talked to a couple other employees, and I'll mention that after a former employee that's here, she reached out to me, like when she first was terminated, and she shared some things with me and concerns that she had, but I never followed those up because I thought it was a situation of kind of sour grapes, so to speak, of someone that had gotten terminated and raspy. So I just left that there, but because there were only 2 employees in this particular report that we got, I called and I specifically stated to the employees, you're under no obligation to say anything to me. This is no pressure or nothing like that. I just really want, to get some feedback because I noticed body language and how our staff has looked at the past couple meetings that we've had. And a couple just seemed like the life was sucked out of them. It seems like, and the feedback I got, I think we're putting too much on the employees. And I've worked in, as I said, I've worked in an environment that's difficult, and I'm not like, I don't have tissue paper skin where folks can't yell at me. But in a professional environment, I think there's a certain level of decorum and the way people should be treated. And they shouldn't have to deal with it. I don't want anybody to deal with it because I dealt with it. I've worked with bosses, as you say, that were just, they did. And if I probably had complained, they would have gotten rid of me. That's why I didn't complain. And I know it takes a lot of courage for people to file a complaint. The people that I talked with didn't file a complaint because I don't think they had the courage. They were just trying to put their head down and get their work done. I don't want to be part of, I can't go for it. I advocated to hire Colin, and I don't take lightly speaking against the ones in their job. But at the same time, I just have to wonder, will this be the same pattern after every negative interaction? If the board comes and they share something with RDB and it's not positive, is he going to go back and put the squeeze on an employee to fix something when he's the ED? Because I don't think that's a burden they should have to bear and how they're gonna worry about it. Being the top one, the top person in the position, it is unfortunately that you'll get the most heat when folks are not happy, but also what I was told by staff is that it was often told to them that he has the final say. He can say, and he's got the final approval on things. And if that's the mantra that you tell your staff, then when you get the heat, don't try to shift the blame to them. And so I don't feel comfortable about going forward and because how is this, I mean, I don't think the relationship is repair. And if we got a good team, we don't want to lose folks on our team trying to salvage the leader of the organization's relationship with them and coaching them up. When we get to this point, something Member Cornell said to us in our February meeting is that he expects our ED to be better than just average. And so when you come to that spot, I hold that and I have really high standards for myself. And I agree with that. I have to agree with that. And so to say we get a coach for him and possibly a coach for Christy, I don't think that's fair to make her carry that burden. She's a subordinate of the organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before I make these two comments, which after reading this report, I was hopeful that I didn't need to get into this, but I apparently do. So I just want to kind of reiterate some of my points. Mr. Swain, when will the investigation and the supporting documentation behind the investigation become public to the public?
Once the board votes today. So,
Okay, so
today.
when I read what I read it from that perspective because we are responsible for this organization. We are, this board. And after February 14th, which was a Monday, I was very hopeful. I was extremely hopeful. I was hopeful because Colin had expressed, I am willing to participate in what Commissioner Pinkerton said, in leadership training. I want to get better. And that was my hope. But then to get this complaint and to have that interaction literally within the same week, Friday, that shattered kind of my confidence that this could proceed forward in a productive way for the trust. And when you read the observations, our HR person, these are her words, these are not my words, lacks self-awareness and then understanding that his behavior, comments, and actions are inappropriate and unprofessional in the workplace setting. It is my opinion that he does not take criticism well, which may lead him to make irrational decisions in stressful situations or when he feels unsupported or attacked. And then she concludes, the behaviors exhibited in both cases may be indicative of pattern issues with stress management, leadership skills, and communications. I can't unread that. I just can't. And I agree, a lot has been accomplished. And I very much want this to be a mutual, Colin's done a great job of getting us where we are, but sometimes the leader of the ship needs to be changed. And after the meeting on Monday, and then thinking that we were moving in a direction and then finding out that we had this incident on Friday, I cannot support another trial.
Well, I essentially wrote exactly the same thing. So here's kind of my inferences, and I stress they're my inferences based on everything that I read. I certainly wasn't witness to any of it, and just my inferences. I think the evaluation at the last meeting might have served as a trigger for some of the post-meeting experiences and behaviors that people have. I too wrote here, just as Ken just was optimistic that after a 2-hour conversation and discussion, we had arrived at this idea of a 90-day revisit and including some coaching supports, not just a course, but some coaching supports, which I understood Mr. Murphy seemed to be anxious to participate in. And then, as Ken said, unfortunately, and again, I understand being in leadership positions in the past myself, And I understand that unfortunately, what appears to have followed that event, rather than the self-reflection and true commitment, was really a different set of behaviors and actions from the report.
So if we have no other board comment, let me say a couple things. I've left the meeting with the same feeling, hopeful that we're going to be able to move forward. I met with Mr. Murphy on the same Friday, a couple hours after the meeting with Christie. And he was clearly still angry. And I've seen Mr. Murphy angry at decisions we've made in the past. And I don't, to me, that's okay. If he wants to vent to an individual board member. I certainly had members on my board to whom I felt comfortable expressing how I felt. It was always visible to me that he was angry, and then he would say that it's fine. And I heard a lot the same on our meeting. The staff didn't like him. That he doesn't understand that. He's never worked for a team that doesn't like him. What struck me when I got the complaint that Monday night following night was how much the similarity in language in terms of some of the things he had said to me. We could pull back from the anger were the things that he had said to Christie without pulling back. That concerned me greatly. I have not read or been privy to the prior complaint, but the fact that there's a pattern where almost a year later you're seeing the same kinds of complaints made me think that coaching isn't going to alter. I don't want to take away from any of the things that Mr. Murphy has accomplished. They have been many. They have been, he has contributed an approach to looking at how we are accountable to the community. He has contributed the hiring of a great staff, created an administrative structure that I think will move the trust forward. Like Commissioner Cornell, I know that once this has become public, it will reinforce perceptions that are out there about communication and the ability to trust not just the leadership at the executive level, but the leadership at the board level. And so I very much appreciated the letter because I appreciated the fact that I do believe you have a great commitment to what it is we're trying to accomplish here. Mr. Murphy, and I would hope that we can come to an agreement if you don't want to see what we've accomplished forever individually. So I want to recognize the contributions, but I think that I'm with some of the other members to the other points we've made. So if we are ready to make a motion, if someone is ready to put a motion forward, I think this would be an appropriate time to do that.
I'll move that we authorize the chair and the attorney to negotiate a mutually acceptable separation agreement that is in line with
A motion and a second.
with the intent there that it's not, you're not the attorney to pause. There's a 20-week severance stage. That's our time frame at which we have to get notice. And between Bob and Maggie and you, the attorney that we work with.
So we have a motion that we negotiate a separation agreement with Mr. Murphy that is consistent with his contract and is acceptable to him and to the trust working with myself and Mr. Murphy's attorney. That's the motion. Is there any public comment?
There's one question. We've got Mr. Duncan on the line.
Mr. Duncan, you're recognized.
So we have to find him. There's quite a few people on here.
Good evening. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Good evening, board. I just wanted to just kind of briefly make a comment. I've had the opportunity over the last several years from the inception of the board, once Colin got hired, to have great conversation and opportunity to be able to work with him. And most recently working with some of the actual staff members. I want to really, speak to this because in Gainesville over this past week has really been a very hard felt week with a lot going on. And I say that because we look at ways to move forward in the best interest for our children, our families, but most importantly, the well-being of our staff as well. I can just tell you, just for the time that I've been actually working within the community since the trust inception, that this staff has gone through a great amount of criticism, even Mr. Murphy himself. I'm not in any ways condoning anything that has been said or anything that has been written, but I can tell you, as from a community leader standpoint, there have been several times that I actually intervene within community groups to clarify misperception and misinformation as it relates to the trust overall as a whole, not just only with Mr. Murphy, but with other staff members. And so it would be unfortunate to actually see this breakup between Mr. Murphy and the Children's Trust, as well as I'm even much as concerned with the relationship that is happening within staff members as well. I'm not speaking in a way to condone anything, as I'm saying. I'm speaking in a way to where I just wanted to make it known that I know that the staff and Mr. Murphy and the trust stuff has really gone through a very critical time, a time where I believe the unity and the coming together to really focus on ways that we can, really help, our children and our families in the community. And so I just wanted to just kind of call in and just kind of share that from a community leader standpoint, working with so many different groups to be able to, diffuse misperception and miscommunication between what the community has viewed as the perception of what they believe that the trust stands for. And I think that there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, but I believe that just kind of moving forward, with the opportunity to continue to work with Mr. Murphy and, work with Ms. Goldwire and staff as well. And I'm saying this because I've had the opportunity over months and years to actually work with the team. And I know each and every one of them well, and I'm saddened by what's happening. And so I just want to call in and just bring that to you guys' attention to what's happening from the community standpoint as it relates to the trust. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others?
We've got Armando Grundy Gomes.
Mr. Gomes, you're recognized.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and my last name is Gomez, not Gomes.
Sorry.
That's all right. That's typical. But I guess my concern from what Mr. Murphy has been expressed in from his public engagement, and especially in dealing with members of the public. Whenever you're dealing with the public, because it's a public trust, and leadership is not about just making decisions or who has the loudest voice. It's also about having empathy and compassion for people. And it would appear to me from certain statements, and I know Mr. Pinkerson very well, I know Mr. Cornell, I think sometimes it also is lacking, where you're looking at a leader like Mr. Murphy and he's lacking empathy and compassion. But also attitude reflects leadership. And if you all have allowed this to pervade itself, you all are culpable just as much as he is. And so for something to continue, I've watched his interactions with members of the public, especially with people that look like me and Mrs. Certain, and there just appears to be a lack of disconnect from some members of you on the board when it's brought to your attention about how African Americans feel about this trust and how it impacts people of color when it comes to issues of equity. I certainly know quite a few of the members on the board that are just very dismissive, and that's unfortunate. Some of you are elected officials, some of you are not. Some of you are just politically active. But I think for Mr. Murphy, for this to continue and for it to continue, this type of behavior sends a bad message. And I think that it's time to move forward and go in a different direction in spite of what he's accomplished, because my concern is again, is how he has treated, especially treated people different than him. And it sounds to me, and I think Mrs. Certain was dead on, and Mr. Cornell was dead on. I think it's time to go in a different direction. Thank you.
Sir. Any others?
Bob Garrett?
Recognize, sir.
Thank you. Board chair. I just wanted to say from the standpoint of course, somebody like me, I'm on the outside looking in. I have a huge heart having worked for organizations in this community, the difficulty of which it is to be a funder. You are very difficult. You're under tremendous scrutiny. There's a lot of judgments. Everybody needs the dollars. We all, and as funders, you want to give the dollars, but you have to have standards. You have to have accountability. I am not familiar with the tensions that have gone on that Mr. Gomez just spoke about, and others. And I've even heard some comments from the community about CTAC. And I frankly have replied back, boy, you know, I've gone to half a dozen board meetings. I've watched these guys from the outside. We are very fortunate to have them. The things that are getting put to work in the community are tremendous. This community has not, probably on an agency level, from what I've perceived as a fundraiser at United Way, really kind of recovered from a change in almost that model. United Way has decreased. A lot of the agencies have not really taken account of full fundraising programs, marketing and development people. To echo the comments of the board member that talked about assistance with grants, I think that's probably a fantastic idea. So I'm not speaking to as much about the situation that you have and the tension and which way to go, but I want to congratulate everybody that's present as a community member for what's been accomplished, where you're going, what I'm confident that the group is going to do. And just to say that it's very difficult out there to be in a position of a funder and operate, build relationships, and navigate. Also, I think that a lot of the staff was not local. I think just from a perception of looking at it, I think that's probably a challenge. And I think number 3 in my mind is once your money starts to go to work, you're going to be able, the staffs are going to be able to be more fully staffed. Those agencies are going to be able to scale and provide a lot more assistance for our community and really operate properly. But I just wanted to say, number 1, huge empathy. Number 2, I really do want to echo those comments to support both outreach and fundraising, knowledge, grant writing, et cetera. And I really hope you guys come to a decision that works for everybody, and both Colin and the board and the community. And I think you guys are going to continue to do a fantastic job.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any other board credit? One more?
We've got 3 more.
3 more.
Andre Sanders.
Say that name again, I'm sorry.
Andre
Sanders. You're recognized.
Yes,
Why is-
hear me? Yes, I just wanted to speak concerning this situation. I just want to give a question for the board to think of. What message are we sending to the kids if we allow this type of behavior to continue in the workplace? If we are going to be an agency for the kids and for the children to better them in their lives, we also have to think about the message that we're sending them. If we say it's okay for someone to continue to have a workplace environment such as this, then they're sending a bad message to say that this is okay, this is allowed, especially in a time where we're living where kids are in a lot of negative situations such as gun violence and all of these different situations. And so violence starts somewhere. Verbal abuse is one. The yelling, screaming, and all of those things are unprofessional. And so with that being said, we got to think about the message we're sending to the community, especially the kids. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I've got Thomas Satchel.
Mr. Satchel, you are recognized.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for allowing the comments and from the public. I just wanted to kind of reiterate that everyone on this board has served in a leadership position at some point in their career, at some time or at some moment. And while every moment has not been necessarily the best, we've had a chance to learn from it. And from what I'm hearing, it sounds like Colin has been faced with a situation where he can have an opportunity to learn from his mistakes. Now, how does that transfer to the community? Because it seems to me that children and families in Gainesville have seen outcomes that we've asked for. Since the birth of the trust, we've seen improvements in overall reading scores, as well as overall outcomes for kids as it relates to services and summer programming being offered. So I stand to say, while there has not been the best conduct going on in the office, as leaders, why don't we allow a chance for this to be a learning opportunity so that we can continue to grow and that kids and families can continue to be impacted in the positive manner that the Children's Trust has done in the past? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so just one more. And that's me. Good afternoon. I'm Ashley Daniel, and I'm Colin's executive assistant. Since July 2020, I've worked alongside Colin and found him to be so passionate about his organization. As you know, he is very personable, knowledgeable, and so invested in making his work better for children and families. His open door policy, willingness to consider new ideas, and ability to find the strengths in all of his employees is inspiring and very much appreciated. His leadership has helped to create the wonderfully diverse and strong team that we are, and has led the trust to contribute to many impactful initiatives that help the children in our community.
Thank you. All right, we're back to the board at this point. We ready for vote? All right. All in favor of the motion, which would allow me and Mr. Swain to negotiate with Mr. Murphy and his attorney amicable separation agreement. Is that a fair restatement of the motion, Mr. Cornell?
Yes.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All against? Aye. So the motion, I think, because I vote aye. Okay, so the motion carries and we will do that. This will come back to the board for ratification at our meeting on the 14th. And in the meantime, Mr. Murphy, we will be in touch, hopefully be able to come up with an agreement. Ms. Goldwire is acting until we appoint an interim, and she has agreed to continue in that role if that was necessary. And so I think that that's where we are.
You'll need a motion on that.
For her to continue.
Yes.
So if I can have a motion to have her continue as acting. We have a motion to continue Christie in the capacity of acting. We have a second. Is there any board discussion on that? Dr. Parton and Mr. Warner.
I'm a little uncomfortable with that. Because I think that just puts a lot of pressure on the employees who we're trying to protect. And also, it doesn't make any sense that an employee could make a complaint about their boss and then become the boss. I don't get that.
She is organizationally the second person. She's got the second highest level position.
My only comment would be that, that we agenda for the March 15th kind of a process for finding an interim, which obviously I know that you'll take, so that's not fair. And I do think it's unfortunate, but I agree that that's just kind of what it's going to happen.
So we have a motion to continue Ms. Goldwire at least until the 14th, which is when our next meeting is. We have a motion, we have a second. Do we have any public comment on that motion? There's no public comment, bringing that back home to the board for vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? One. Okay. Motion carries. Any other board member comments? We have general public comments. Do we have any general public comments? Any board comments?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
March.
Thank you.
Do appreciate it very much. Seeing nothing further than